It is outrageous. It's a page right out of Xi's playbook. This is just despicable, disgusting, and against democratic values. Trump and his allies seem to want to shut down speech that they don't like to hear. That is not what democracies do. That is what autocracies do. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with Kimmel or not. He has the right to free speech. And so it is just outrageous. It is indicative of autocracy. And I am just outraged by it.
The right to free speech, does that mean the same thing as a right to a television show? I mean, is that what we're referring to here? You have the right to free speech, so therefore you have the right to be on TV and not tell the truth? Is this what Jimmy Kimmel gets and no one else gets? And since when did the left all of a sudden be believers in not deplatforming people? Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. Curtis Houck joins us right now. He is from Newsbusters, where he is the managing editor. You can find his work at newsbusters.org. Let's start where all this starts from. As you monitor these things and watch these things, managing editor of Newsbusters, this is about Jimmy Kimmel lying, or is this about a joke regarding the assassination of Charlie Kirk?
I mean, it's a combination of all of these things, Tony. I would say that the pressure from the FCC is not something that is should be the thrust of why they made this decision. We looked at the Stephen Colbert cancellation. The show cost about $100 million. It was only bringing in, half that. So it was losing a lot of money every year for a staff of 200 people. You would think it's something very similar with Jimmy Kimmel. And you'd add in the fact that Jimmy takes summers off and he has a series of fill-in hosts. And this is a husband and wife combination. His wife is the head writer at that show.
Right.
But I think the Sinclair and Nexstar moves, those are two major TV, local TV conglomerates that own many, if a huge percentage, overwhelming percentage of the local ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, CW affiliates across the country. They had made the decision to not show this. Now, the left has been saying that there's a grand conspiracy afoot because they're Nexstar, which actually owns the good people at News Nation as well. They are trying to buy the Tegna stations, which is another smaller one. So they're trying to receive FCC approval. And thus they think they did this decision to curry favor. And then Sinclair, there's a bunch of conservatives. But you look at the substance of Kimmel's comments, it was deeply offensive. He was trying to suggest A, conspiracy theory, and B, it wasn't even funny, saying Trump's behaving like a 4-year-old. Like, what does that even mean? It was just so pathetic.
I don't disagree about Kimmel. And certainly I would love a gig where I make millions when I get summers off. That's pretty dreamy. Talking to Curtis Houck of Newsbusters. Check it out for yourself, newsbusters.org. But you mentioned Nexstar, you mentioned Sinclair, the deal that Nexstar is trying to engage with Tegna and the purchase of a whole bunch of stations there. And are they now moving the affiliates to not carry Kimmel to curry favor with the Trump administration, which I would say it would be a tremendous issue if indeed was the case. But in the conversation of the timeline, were the affiliates moving first, or was Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC, making this statement first? Chicken or egg, which one came first in this reaction to Jimmy Kimmel's comments about how the killer was clearly part of MAGA when, of course, that's a lie?
They're trying to suggest that there's a cabal afoot. The left is trying to suggest that there's a conspiracy theory afoot between Brendan Carr and these affiliate ownership groups and the FCC and the Trump administration, that it's if you fire Kimmel or you pull Kimmel from the air, we'll approve this. It was much the same situation with Stephen Colbert and Skydance, the Ellison family buying CBS's parent company, Paramount. That was the suggestion there as well. Also, I would just say, looking at the ratings in second quarter, Gutfeld was pulling in about 3.2 million viewers, I believe, and Kimmel was less than half that. And obviously Fox News, a cable network, not subject to the same FCC scrutiny as ABC, CBS, NBC, and also appears in way less homes than ABC does. I'll just add our two things that we found. Mike beat writer Alex Christie, who's been all over the late night show since September 2022, has found that since he started tracking guests, September 2022 through the end of June, Kimmel had 58 liberal Democrats on the show versus 2 conservative Republicans. And in both cases were Mike Lindell being willing to be mocked and so on and so forth. And in 2024, Kimmel told 3,333 political jokes. Of those, 3,051 were aimed at the right, 92%. And the last thing I'll just say on this, Tony, is Jimmy Kimmel is going to be allowed to, if he doesn't come back, go on and do whatever he wants. He's still alive. He's still alive. Charlie Kirk is not alive. Jimmy Kimmel is alive. He is free to go about his life as he sees fit. He's going to be fine. He's a multimillionaire in Hollywood with plenty of friends.
Talking to Curtis Houck of newsbusters.org, part of MRC. That is the point. And I took a respectable bit of umbrage with Mike Birbiglia, a comic who was quoted in Variety by saying, anybody who doesn't stand up for Jimmy Kimmel doesn't actually believe in free speech. And I'm a comic and I've stood up for a lot of comics. But this is a different argument. Nobody is stating that Jimmy Kimmel doesn't still own comedy clubs in Vegas and won't be able to still get on stage and won't be able to have a YouTube channel, won't be able to do a whole series of things or get picked up by another network. No one is making that argument. The question is, how did he come to be on the outs of ABC? I agree with you on ratings. I agree with you on the lack of funny. I agree with you, and I appreciate the numbers on the number of times he had this kind of guest versus that kind of guest, the number of jokes here versus the number of jokes there. It's a hard work putting all that data together. Good job by you and Christy and that entire team. But the question before us is, when we get into this conversation about deplatforming, it was the political left that was overjoyed to engage a level of deplatforming. You had Representative Ocasio-Cortez saying that it was about time that there was some deplatforming. And if you never heard what it is that Representative Ocasio-Cortez said, let me play this for you. This was posted to X.
Tucker Carlson is out at Fox News. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. What I will say, though, is while I'm very glad that the person that was arguably responsible for some of the largest, driving some of the most amounts of death threats and violent threats, not just to my office, but to plenty of people across the country, I also kind of feel like I'm like waiting for the cutscene at the end of a Marvel movie after all the credits have rolled. And then you see like the villain's like hand reemerge out to grip over like the end of a building or something. But deplatforming works and it is important. And there you go.
Deplatforming works, Curtis. That's the work of the Democratic Party just a couple years ago, regardless of what you think of Tucker Carlson. But they were very much into this. And you had the Biden administration working overtime with Facebook on this story, Curtis.
Yeah, I do love the fact that she kind of seems to almost imply like, oh, yeah, this might come back to bite us, but like, who cares? It's worth it. It's worth it in the end. And I would add another one specific to ABC, Roseanne Barr. Roseanne Barr was let go by ABC a second time, and it was many of the same people celebrating this entire thing. The thing that is most important for listeners...
Walk me through it because I want to make sure I remember properly. I remember she got let go, but I don't remember the circumstances.
I believe she said something particularly racist or offensive.
Or believed to be racist.
Yeah, something like that. But the point was she was let go, and they said it's a private company making decisions about who it wants to employ. And everybody was just generally fine with that. But I think the most important thing for viewers to underline is the fact that the media here, they are more mournful of Jimmy Kimmel losing his job than they were about Charlie Kirk losing his life. CNN, MSNBC last night, with the exception of one of MSNBC's shows that was pre-taped ahead of time, it was wall to wall with Kimmel last night, Nothing there. It was pathetic to see, and it really shows the priorities that these people have. That in terms of where they what interests them, that Kimmel lives and Kirk doesn't. But again, I have to remind folks, this is just a TV show. It is just a TV show.
Walk me through that one. Talking to Curtis Houck of newsbusters.org, part of MRC. And Roseanne was fired because it was a joke about Valerie Jarrett, the Obama aide, referring to her as the offspring of, and this is the quote, I don't know, I will say the quote from Variety, characterizing her as the offspring of the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes. And I mean, it is an offensive thing to say. I believe what Roseanne said is that I didn't know she was even black, and then it kind of exploded from there. So one could argue that it was an offensive thing to say. But the follow-up argument is to your point, whereas the left was like, well, it's a private company. They can do what they want. The question here is about the FCC involvement in the Brendan Carr statements. But you brought up something, and I'll get to that, that's very interesting. You're talking about this in relationship to Charlie Kirk, because, of course, that's where the statement comes from in his assassination. Is it your view, as you monitor so many of these things as you do over there at Newsbusters, that the left is unwilling to recognize the popularity of Kirk? Are they unwilling to say that murder is wrong? Are they unwilling to upset a progressive audience that might vilify them for noticing that murder is wrong because you don't like what somebody's saying? They're having a hard time with just being rationally normal about saying that assassination is not an answer to how we do things in America. What is your take on what's keeping them from that? What brings Jimmy Kimmel to want to say that I'm going to lie about who assassinated Kirk because, well, for name the reason?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, the easy answer is he's friends with a lot of them. Jake Tapper was particularly emotionally aggrieved yesterday, both on his show, and he did a little Murrow, as he likes to call it. He did a monologue from his house wearing a Philly City Connect sweatshirt, talking about how evil it was in the grand conspiracy afoot between Nexstar and Sinclair and Tegna and Brendan Carr and everything else. But I think at a much deeper level, Tony, it has to do with the fact that many of these people, they derive their happiness or lack thereof from politics, whether they are in power or not, whether they are engaging in institutional capture or not. And what 2024 has shown, and what the last week has been another reminder, tragically, is that to them, that they are not in control. And so you look at the media coverage, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot, which is they've been on this interesting path in just 8 days. When it first happened, you saw some people, because it was a shocking event, and this is the interesting thing that happens when a shocking, tragic event happens or breaking news event happens that's unexpected, a profession that thrives on groupthink has to fight. It's every man or woman for himself. They sometimes and actually offer genuine, solid, smart, thoughtful reactions. And we saw that from some people. Brian Stelter pointed out that this country really only works if we solve our disagreements with words, not violence. But you had other people, Matt Dowd, Katie Tur, talk about hateful thoughts and calling them controversial and the lightning rod, so on and so forth. And then they try to say he was a right-winger, which is where Jimmy Kimmel comes in. And then they were trying to say the shooter himself is responsible for his actions, unlike what they tried to do after, say, the El Paso mass shooting at the Walmart, where they said, oh, President Trump likely inspired this deranged, xenophobic person because Trump wants to build the wall. But now it's the power of love. And they're trying to, between Matt Gutman, the video clip that I found first from ABC, and Montel Williams on CNN a few nights ago, they're trying to say murderers are people too, as I told Dr. Drew yesterday. But it just shows that they have no true moral compass. Well, they do have a moral compass, but it's only for themselves and for their own ideology. And because Kimmel is part of that apparatus,
right?
He's the guy who does their fundraisers and so on and so forth. They see that as a personal attack on them, and they refuse to realize or accept the fact that a lot of people don't feel that way. And the last thing I'll just say, because this ties into people getting fired from their jobs because of people celebrating the Charlie Kirk assassination. It's like these people have never heard of company code of conducts, you know? Yes, people are going to get fired from your jobs if you walk into your boss's office and you curse them out and you talk about how they're a horrible person. You know, like that's going to happen. You sexually harass someone at the office, probably going to get fired. It's very much the same kind of thing in terms of, company code of conduct, or else you can't just say free speech.
And I think that goes a long way in the conversation of the long list or long, train of abuses regarding Jimmy Kimmel, and certainly in the eyes of an audience he wasn't after. And I'm curious to hear from more of these affiliates about what they thought about what Kimmel was putting on the air every day. But this brings us to Brendan Carr, the chief of the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. In your view, his comments on the podcast about the affiliates should be paying attention to this, and we need to stand up to this, and we need to do something about this. In your view, did he go too far?
I would say what he said is correct. I would say the easy way or the hard way part is going to be karate chopped by the left. That's probably the only thing I would say. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. That's the only clip that I've really seen that's come back to bite him in the 24 hours from the Benny show. But otherwise, what he said is correct. And in fact, I was just having a conversation with one of my colleagues, the great Dan Schneider, about this. I took a bunch of classes in college. Now, this was I was 2010 to 2014 at Penn State University. And so a lot of the media classes I took, they pointed this out about the FCC, that the broadcast networks, and this is where Brendan Carr has been masterful as FCC chairman, educating the public, because what he's saying is entirely factual. It's not going to get fact checked because these fact checkers know it's true and they don't want to give them credit for saying this. ABC, CBS, NBC radio stations, they operate under different rules. They are granted licenses over the airwaves, in television's case, via the old proverbial rabbit ears, by the FCC. They have to operate in the interest of the public good. They have to provide educational programming. Whereas CNN, MSNBC, Current TV back in the day with Al Gore, those networks operated separately. So any leftist that you may see on Bluesky or one of these other places trying to say, see, they're going to come for CNN or the New York Times, the FCC is going to drag them down, that is not really a thing, because they operate under wholly separate, different set of rules than everyone else. It's more up to the cable companies and the providers, to the streamers, about whether they are given platforms or not. Whereas ABC, CBS, NBC are a whole separate category, and therefore their bar in terms of what their programming has to meet is way higher.
I will tell you that I understand and I agree, but those people who are concerned about going after some of these platforms, they're the ones who told us if we didn't like Twitter, why don't we start our own? And they started Parler, and then they said, well, we're not going to allow that on the app store, or this, that, and the other. They did that same deplatforming of actual entire platforms, not just people. Curtis Houck of newsbusters.org. I appreciate taking the time to be with us. More coming up. I'm Tony Katz. This is Tony Katz Today.